Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmitty, Swanny and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of 3, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Not too bad. How are you all going?
Mighty fine, except I can't feel my toes.
Yeah, it's cold, isn't it?
A bit cold.
Yeah, it's freezing. We bought these hoodie things from Maya.
Yeah.
And they certainly help warm things up a little, which is nice.
I do like an hoodie.
They're good, aren't they? My kids have got those, although they've kind of grown out of them. We got them a couple of years ago, but they were fabulous to put on over your pajamas to get around.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're streetwear.
Well, I wear mine everywhere. I don't care.
I don't know.
Is yours do you have a dressing gown and an hoodie?
I do.
I'm figuring she's in her gown now.
This is my gown. My hoodie is actually too hot. I know, hard to believe, but it's so thick. It's nice if I've got nothing else on. Very risque.
Nothing says sexy time like your hoodie with nothing on.
That's right.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, look, I bought one for Tony, right? And he often walks around with
nothing underneath.
Nothing underneath. And then he bends over without thinking about it. And if I'm behind him, the little skirt comes up just enough that his little dangling nutsack is there for me to see. And I often, like when we're doing a job usually, and he bends over and I just turn away and smile to myself. And he turns and looks at me. I'm like, yes, you were giving me the old view of the old crown jewels there. Thanks. You can pop them away. Yes, it's quite the sight. Anyway. Sharing a little bit.
There you go, guys. To be clear, you need to make sure you take off whatever you've got underneath your hoodies and walk around with no pants on as well. And
then bend over for people. Yeah,
that's how they do it in Sunbury.
That's how we do it.
Do jobs.
Do jobs and bend over.
Can they wear socks or Ugg boots if they are, exposed from the waist down?
I mean, some people are funny about socks. I'm okay with it. It's cold, right? The whole reason you're wearing the hoodie is it's cold. Yes, so I'm fine with that. I mean, I'm not fine with whole nutsack in your face, but apart from that, yeah. Okay, well, I suppose we should introduce ourselves then. I'm Schmitty.
I'm Swanny.
And I'm Clarkey. And together we are Trial by Wine.
Yeah, when we recorded together, we were together on that, Clarkey and I, strangely, given we were in the same room.
Where did the last night end up after we last recorded? Did it get a bit messy?
In the
spa, yeah. It did. It started messy and it only got messier.
Well, you were nicely pickled by the time we departed.
That is a polite way of putting it. Pissed to snooze, I would say. Yeah.
Oh, you're on good form.
Luckily, no one wore their hoodie with nothing underneath in the spa.
I had my hoodie, and I did actually put it on after our spa, but I'm much more discreet than some, put it that way. It was lovely. We had a great weekend. How's Lazarus going? Still alive?
Still alive, yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So
we
had a chook incident.
Oh.
Kipling grabbed it. It got out of the pen and Kipling grabbed it. And
he lockjawed on it.
He lockjawed on it big time, and I wasn't sure whether or not that chicken would survive, but yeah, he did. So there you go.
Schmitty had to stick her hand down his throat so that he would let go of the chicken. That's how much he had it.
Yeah, no, he was definitely convinced that was
and
his.
And the chicken was fine.
The chicken somehow just went and was fine. And I was
the chicken called Lazarus prior to this?
No. But
that's where he got his name, right?
Yeah, correct. Chicken had no name prior to this. And we had a lamb born over the last couple of days.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And Mum's feeding it, so we don't have to bottle feed.
Oh, good one. Oh, another one that needs to be bottle fed.
No.
Oh, no.
Mummy's feeding.
You're feeding your mum.
Your mum.
Was that why you invited her up, so she could feed the lamb?
Yeah, feed the lamb.
Yes.
All right. What are we drinking?
Well, this will come as a huge shock to you all. It's not Coke Zero. It's Diet Coke.
Oh.
Hey.
And the reason was, I know, I let the stockpile run too low when I ran out yesterday, and when I went to get more, there was no Coke Zero in the shop that I went to. So Diet Coke it is, people. I know you'll be surprised, but yeah.
Oh, how very fancy.
I will push on through. What about you guys?
Not a Diet Coke fan.
I did a drive by Dan Murphy's looking for something that wasn't zero alcohol wine, but wasn't going to get us sozzled. We're going to fire us up. We don't want to get fired up tonight. And we ended up getting ginger beer. It's called hard ginger beer, which I think is not needed.
Sugar. Just means it's alcoholic.
Well, yeah, but ginger beer often is. So stop with your carry-on. Just because you have to have hard lemon and hard everything.
What's that about?
Ginger beer.
It just means alcoholic.
It's just marketing. Who would do that for a job, right?
No, what a lot of carry-on.
Well, some of us only market boring things, so it's fine.
And you, Schmitty?
Kombucha. You can get a hard kombucha as well, apparently.
Oh.
Not that I know.
Have you got hard kombucha?
Kombucha? No.
You can. Well, kombucha, technically is an alcohol, right? Because it's a fermented sugar.
Fermented.
So it generally also always has a small alcoholic content, but you can get one with a proper alcoholic content. Not that I've ever had it. It's a health drink.
So you're just having kombucha with no alcohol?
I don't drink it much. In fact.
No, but are you not having alcohol is what I mean.
Oh, me? Oh, sorry, my drinking. Yeah, no, I'm on pirate juice because...
How did we get to kombucha?
Totally missed it. Oh, we're on the hard.
That's why I kept questioning you, Mucky. Surely we're not doing trial by kombucha nowadays.
No.
I'm not okay with that.
Being a bit thick, sorry. It's just the hard thing.
It's a confusing question. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking the Kraken, actually. Going back to my old favourite. Kraken black spiced rum with a bit of Pepsi Max.
Pepsi?
I will always drink a Pepsi Max over a Coke Zero. We've had this conversation many a time.
It's crazy talk.
Mm-hmm.
I think something's happened over here. Every time I'm in a restaurant or anywhere, a cafe, it's all Pepsi because obviously
they're winning the war.
Coke, exactly. They're pricing themselves out of the market. But for someone like me, they always go, "Is it all right?" And the moment they start saying, "Is it all right?" I go, "No, thanks. I'll just have a sparkling water."
Well,
no,
I really think you need to. Pepsi Max.
I'll just sit here and sulk.
Not Diet Pepsi and not full fat Pepsi, but Pepsi Max is in my opinion, superior, definitely to Diet Coke. Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, Diet Coke is
gross.
Anyway,
it's just like
what do
you call it? Post mix. It
post
always
mix.
tastes like
so
post
base.
mix.
Yeah.
Who's got a story for us?
I do. I have a story.
Yay!
And I have to say that this is one of the most enjoyable. Is not the right word, but I've really found this really quite an interesting kind because it plays into the things that I'm interested in. So it's not. There's no serial killer for starters.
Kardashians.
But, I don't like the
Real Housewives.
I don't watch that either. I like popular culture.
Love Island.
Oh, okay, maybe a bit of that. But, and never.
That's me.
No.
Yep.
I don't really watch a lot of any of that stuff anymore because I don't really
have time.
Well, I haven't for years. Not so much have time, but I don't even know how to watch it.
I've actually booked a weekend with a couple of girls who I've been watching Below Deck series with. Hot Girl Summer, we called it, which is just a joke between us because all three of us, sorry girls if you ever listen, but let's just say we're full of figured. And when we do our Hot Girl Summer, because we started doing it in summer, they'd come over and we'd order a gratuitous amount of Hungry Jacks and sit down on the couch and just eat like pigs and lay like big fat whales watching Below Deck going, oh yeah, Hot Girl Summer.
Hot Girl Summer.
Anyway,
I like it.
We're moving it into Hot Girls Winter. And at Tony's suggestion of all people, we're going to do a weekend on the houseboat, doing Below Deck on the houseboat. Now that I've got Elon Musk up there. Yeah. So that'll be fun. Anyway, I digress. But yes, so I have to now stockpile any available series of Below Deck for my Hot Girls experience.
Oh, cool. So you can binge it.
Goodness, sounds like a cracking weekend, that one.
It will be. It'll be a hoot.
I bet it will.
Sorry, Swanny. Tell us about what you got.
I just
make a note of Hot Girl Summer.
Oh yeah, I'm jotting a note down. A little note. I just thought of something. Hot Girl Summer. I like it. I'll steal that. Right. So anyway, this sort of was something that I found, and I guess, I do love a little bit of geography and I love a little bit of
map time.
Sociology, map time. So we're going to start off with map time. Not a lot of map time, but a little bit of map time.
Okay.
And actually, why don't I tell you my sources first? My sources are theguardian.com, slate.com,
new one.
Wikipedia, Uncertain.com, and there is definitely a documentary, and I'll reveal what that is at the end because I don't want you having a look at it. It's so good. Honestly, I loved it. It's the best, probably I don't know that you would love it as much as I do, but I just found it so interesting. It's so well done. It's quite recent, I think maybe last year, and I just, I want my husband to watch it. I just think it was just really well done, and there's...
Oh, now that speaks volumes.
That's high praise indeed, yeah, it does. Because I just think it's just really interesting because it explains something to me that I've never quite understood and I've heard referenced. And
ultimately,
it would come up in conversation, or I'd see a lot of stuff that I watch as American or news or whatever else, and I'd hear it mentioned and I'd think, is that what they're trying to say? And that is, bold statement to come out of the gates with, that Boston is a racist town. And I've heard that so many times.
How many people listen from Boston?
I don't know.
Is that like Australia is a racist country?
Well, it is.
It's probably not dissimilar to that.
Well, it is. I'm outraged at Boston, but not Australia.
I wasn't outraged. I was just thinking how many people are going to put off, but Australia, we know.
No, I don't think that, because I think it's one of those things that's quite often quoted in the US, and comedians say it. And I'm always like, but why? I don't understand.
Boston outside of everywhere else.
Correct, because isn't everywhere, racist essentially or whatever? And
everyone's a little bit racist sometimes. Doesn't mean we go around committing hate crimes. Anyway.
Yes.
Is that Lily Allen's latest song?
No, it's from Avenue Q. Great musical.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
I wonder where I saw it.
Don't know.
I know who I saw it with. Brilliant. It must have been London or New York, I guess.
Oh,
with the puppets, right?
Show off. Yes. You're such a show.
It must have been, but I can't remember.
Yeah, where was I again?
For the life of me.
West End or Broadway, I can't recall.
I'm going to get, I actually don't know, maybe London, I think. All right. I know who I saw it with, and I was with her in two places, so there you go. Okay, so Boston. Boston has its reputation, certainly in the US, as being a very racist city. And I was sort of wondering why that was. So I sort of went and had a look, and it appears that it has a very sort of segregated population. A lot of it comes down to how it actually sits sort of geographically. And when they show you maps of Boston, there are distinctive neighbourhoods. And it's when they speak to people, it's like you never leave your neighbourhood. And neighbourhood's like a little city within itself. And then those cities appear to be separated by colour and wealth and class. So I read somewhere that the WASPs have the money in Boston, the Irish Catholics run the politics in Boston, and then there is the black population. And the three of them don't really see eye to eye.
No, Latinos or Asians?
They're there, but they're less of an issue in terms of the broad spectrum. When people are really talking about racism in Boston, it is a black versus white concept.
Okay. Does WASP stand for White Anglo-Saxon Person
Protestant,
or something?
Yeah.
Protestant, right.
White Anglo-Saxon
never heard that
Protestant.
term.
Haven't you?
No, never.
A lot of people, like old money is usually waspy. They're waspy.
Right.
It's preppy. A lot of the people, they'll make claims that they're connected to the Mayflower, which is the first ship that crossed over from the UK. Like, there are all these things. Wasps are considered, that lineage from...
Yes, because the early settlers were Protestants, because they're all, well, not all, but there were a lot of Puritans, and because they thought that there was too much carry-on going on, having too much fun. Anyone who's seen Blackadder would know about the Janet shaped like a thingy, which was, a crime against God or something. That's like the oldest money. Is that right, Swanny?
Yes.
Literally, it's like someone here saying, I'm from the First Fleet, although not a convict.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting. So Boston is known as the centre of democratic royalty, the home base of the Kennedy clan. So you probably know that when you think about that they're from Boston originally. And that's the Irish Catholic connection. And they definitely see, if you see Boston depicted in anything media-wise, it's quite often that Celtic, the Greens, anything that's very Irish, that's a huge part of the identity of Boston in and of itself.
Okay.
However, it's also considered the home of 20th century classical liberalism, and it's home, which you'll also be aware, to elite colleges such as Harvard and MIT, so the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. So it's a place that's there's big thinkers there. A lot of people there are coming in and working at these universities or studying at these universities, but that doesn't necessarily reflect Boston itself. Boston, as I sort of said, have all these different neighbourhoods, but everybody has a sort of a pecking order on where they sit. And I think that is amplified by having these sort of WASP and educated people there, and then the people who are at the lowest socioeconomic sort of level are really very marginalised within the Boston city sort of landscape. Yeah.
Social groups.
So it's important to note that sort of in the 1970s, there was one particular situation which, again, I'd never heard of this, but it must have been a big, big deal if you're living in Boston, and it would have been big. It would have been covered nationally. So in 1974, Bostonians violently resisted a desegregation. And what was proposed and what had to happen was it was called the busing crisis, and busing as in buses that drive.
Yeah.
And they were trying to desegregate the school system. So to make it equal,
so in 1970 what?
4. Somebody said, we're going to take the children from the white neighbourhoods into black neighbourhoods and the children from black neighbourhoods into the white neighbourhoods, so that it's, more democratic, so that everybody can have exposure to the same education. That did not go down well at all. And there were huge and violent protests and riots. And it was predominantly led by white people.
Shocked me. White people didn't want black people on their turf.
Oh my God,
what a load of old.
The people had to say was just
disgusting.
Oh my God. I mean, we thankfully do not live in times that are that emboldened. I mean, it just,
you'd be amazed.
It was unbelievable.
Anyway.
I don't think I would. I think I'd accept that people absolutely still do. But this was, talking to reporters live, and they were just absolutely shameless and so angry. It was unbelievable.
Conversation. I could go on for hours.
I know. It's a big piece, but it was just trying to sort of set the scene. So if you were a child, certainly a young black student, being on buses, they would have like a supervisor on the bus, and they'd go through certain neighbourhoods and they'd have to duck because people would just be throwing stuff at the buses. And it continued on for years. There was like, yeah.
Oh, that's right. Let's victimise children.
There was a man who was, I think he might have been a professor I think when he was interviewed, he was a professor at Harvard or something like that. I don't know what he was at the time. But he and his wife was white, they had moved to Boston. Anyway, he was outside the city hall, and I don't think he had anything to do with anything that was going on, but he got attacked because he was black, and, someone's attacking him with the American flag, just stuff that was really violent. So that's...
And with the American flag.
Yeah, that's just... And all that stuff upsets me hugely. So there was a massive undercurrent of racial tension, and it was that's in this, like, from the mid 70s, going forward. It was really the sort of the backstory there. There was I presume he was an Irish Catholic. That was his background. What's his name?
Mick O'Connell.
I've got rid of Ray Flynn. Anyway, he became the city mayor, and he was the first person who was able to make some inroads. And I think he'd been a former basketballer, so he had a bit of a profile before that, not just seen as a politician. And he would go into the black communities, into the projects, as you will know them, and that's what they were, those terrible, all the buildings look the same, go and play basketball with the kids, torch them. And he had quite a positive impact on the Bostonian sort of culture, and went some ways to sort of improving things because they were just so bad in the late 70s. So by the time the 80s came around, again, not ideal, but a little bit better than they were at its height of the busing crisis in the mid-70s. So moving into the 80s, we then have another bit of an issue that comes along that you'll also be aware of, and that is crack cocaine. That didn't come from Boston. It actually came out of
Colombia.
Out of New York, well, yes, but it made its way down as a thing to Boston. And in 1989, George W. Bush, you probably would have seen it, but not seen it for a long time, he addresses the nation and he tells them, crack cocaine is our biggest issue. It's our biggest threat. And, he's got a bag of it and says, this was actually, they got it across the road from the White House. It's everywhere. We need to eradicate it. Yeah, crack, yeah.
Cracks the rock you smoke. Yeah.
Isn't there some crack is whack and... There's some
probably
joke about it, I'm not sure.
I remember when I went and visited London, I think probably the first time, and a friend, my brother-in-law's brother was living...
I have no idea where you're going with this, but I'm really intrigued.
No. He was living in a flat...
I'm a little bit nervous.
In Whitechapel.
I thought I knew you, but anyway, go.
No, he was living in a flat in Whitechapel, right? And it was a pretty shitty socioeconomic area. Mm. And he'd said that we could stay with him. You imagine this, right? Like 3 girls who had just all graduated from a Catholic college in Melbourne, never been anywhere, our first big European travels, and we go and visit with Marty, and all I remember is the smell in the stairwell because there were kids lighting up and smoking crack cocaine.
Oh, my God. That's horrendous. And I'm like, I'd be so scared.
I was terrified. I booked it straight back up to Scotland to have my big adventure. Anyway.
Oh, good on you, darling.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's awful. So George W. Bush has gone on, to address the nation, and as a result of that, it probably existed before that, but it really became a thing within policing, which was stop and frisk policy, and it allowed police to stop and pat down anyone they suspected may have committed a crime. May be committing a crime, may have committed, or be about to commit a crime. So
pretty much anyone.
Absolutely. Their suspicion alone is what allowed them to do the stop and search.
Is this senior?
Stop and grope.
Stop and frisk. What'd you say, sorry?
Is this George W. Bush Senior?
Yeah. So 1989.
This is why the penal system in the US is in such terrible state, because they've got ridiculous laws about people who just look twice at drugs and they get thrown away for 100 years. Yeah.
And I've seen this, and I will get the statistics, or I don't have any statistics to quote, but some years ago I watched a documentary, and it was about how, so when slavery was outlawed, the penal system came in to sort of cover what slavery did. So if you're putting enough people in there as you can, you're still able to do the things that slavery was looking after. So how they did that was the punishment if you had cocaine versus the punishment if you had crack cocaine was if you had crack cocaine, which was much more inclined that it was going to be a black person had it versus a white rich person who was doing cocaine in a nightclub, an office block, whatever else. The crime did not have the same penalty. So crack cocaine was much more, and off you'd go to prison and you'd circle into that. It's a way of having people enslaved by being in jail and then having to do jobs, and that's how they continue to do that. So stop and frisk as a policy may have existed before that, but it certainly became a forefront measure in trying to eradicate crack cocaine.
Yeah.
So really in Boston, you've had the busing crisis. There are 3 or sort of 2 black neighbourhoods, Mission Hill and Roxbury in particular, and South Boston, which I think is white, and they're sort of interconnected, and that's where they share borders. And, I was thinking, well, what happens with people if they don't want their kids to go to school? Apparently enrollment just dropped. So people were like, well, I'm not going to send my kids to school. So they had an issue with that. White people started sending their kids to private schools, so they didn't have to participate in the busing thing. And just generally there was this sort of idea that with crack cocaine that black neighbourhoods were not to be gone to, didn't want to visit them, and that the policing within those black communities was kind of everyone's free game all the time. I've seen people interviewed who grew up in those communities and at different stages, actually pre-crack cocaine, because crack cocaine really did have a terrible impact on them, they actually really liked the way they grew up, because they grew up as part of a community. They were on the street, playing ball, having house parties. One young guy was talking about how they didn't know any different. They weren't trying to be in white neighbourhoods. That's not what their objective ever was. It was just that was their lifestyle. And he said he had the most incredible childhood, hanging out with, his neighbours, his aunties, his uncles. They were a huge community. Crack cocaine, when it came in, destroyed a lot of that. And you end up seeing a lot of people growing up with their grandparents because mum and dad have fallen prey to
victim to it, yeah.
But that's kind of where Boston was at by sort of the 80s. So I found that quite interesting, having seen that it been mentioned so many times as being racist. I thought, God, surely every city is. But I think particularly with them, because they've got these very distinguished levels of white class, i.e. WASPs, the educated, and the Irish Catholic, who are very proud, very white, very vocal, versus the black. I can see why people call it that now, but I had no idea. So that's kind of my background. That's all. There's so many crimes in that, but there is one crime that I want to tell you about today. And that crime occurred on October the 23rd in 1989. And it starts with a 911 call to the police dispatch. And there's a man on the phone who says that he and his heavily pregnant wife have just left a prenatal class at I think it's called the Brigham's Hospital nearby, and they have been carjacked and they've both been driven to another area. He doesn't know where they are. They're in an isolated area and they've both been shot. So when they've both been shot, the man who's speaking to is it dispatch you call the police dispatch?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. He says, my wife has been shot. He doesn't say that she's pregnant, actually. He kind of forgets to mention that. My wife has been shot and so have I. And the dispatcher's saying, where are you? And he can't say where he is. And they're saying, anything, a distinguishing building. And he's saying, we've been driven out of the route they're on. I don't know where I am. I can't see anything. And he's like, a street, a sign, a building, anything. Are you near the hospital? What can you see? And as I said, he'd been shot, so he doesn't say a lot. He's sort of pretty quiet. Then he sort of comes back in. You can't quite tell if he's
where is he
dying
at this
or dead.
point?
He's in the car. He's calling from his car on his car phone. 1989.
Jesus, they must have had one of those big brick Motorola things.
Yeah, my dad had one of those. Yeah.
Wow.
And they are saying, "Is your wife alive?" And he said, "She's gurgling."
Oh no. Oh no. So
they continue
shot her in the chest because it's her lungs?
No, she's been shot in the head. She's been shot in the head and he's been shot. We don't know at the time. He's been shot in the abdomen.
Why did you ask?
Sorry.
And so they're saying, right, how can we find it? They identify the car, which is I forgot the name, it was a Nissan something. It's a blue Nissan something. And it's a cube. And so they've got the cruisers. I always love that. The cruisers are out looking for them. So they've got several police cars out driving around and they don't really know where they are. So they're starting from the hospital, trying to work out from where they would have gone, where they could have got to. And then what they realise, he goes quiet at one point. He starts to say things like, I'm passing out. And they're like, oh my God. He's like, no, you're not. Stay with me. We're going to get you. They're out looking for you. Can you see them? There are lots of people looking for you. We're going to get you. And then what they realise is they can hear the sirens when he's silent. They can hear the sirens going. So they kind of start to realise we might be able to work this out. So what they say to the different crews out looking for them is turn your siren on, turn your siren off. And they start to work out whose siren they can hear. And through that, that's how they narrow it down. They're pretty close how they get them. So they pull up and there they find Charles Stuart and his wife, Carol Stuart. So as it turned out, on the night that this happened, there was a crew from CBS reality television series Rescue 911 were riding with the Boston Emergency Medical Services personnel.
You love it when they film everything.
Is like when I first saw it, I was like, fuck, I didn't understand why I was seeing what I was seeing. And I didn't read this in like an article until much later. I went, that makes sense because it's so graphic and you just see exactly what the police arrived to see. It is shocking.
2 people have been shot.
They get there and you show them, you see them being taken out of the car. So when they arrive, Carol is totally, still got a seatbelt on, she's totally slumped forward, bleeding from the head.
Oh, Jesus.
She looks like she's dead. She's not. And Charles is coming in and out of sort of consciousness and has had a gunshot wound to his stomach.
Oh, my God.
So they obviously take them directly to the hospital, actually the hospital that they had just come from. Brigham. It's called Brigham and Women's Hospital. Yeah. So they take them there.
Back.
Yeah. So Carol Ann Stewart and Charles Chuck Stewart Jr.
Oh, Chucky.
Are about 30 years old at the time, and they've been married for a few years. They're a pretty young couple, and they're pregnant with their first child. And as I said, they'd just been to that prenatal meeting at the hospital. So they arrive back at the hospital, and Carol dies at 2:50 a.m. on the 24th of October. The baby boy is delivered by C-section and obviously is in a critical care ward because his mum has obviously been so highly affected by the wound that she took to her head. And they are able to save Charles. And herein lies the the most interesting part of this crime, which is not the crime itself, it is what then transpires in them trying to find who did this
to
Charles and Carol. When Charles was taken out of the car, he was able to say that a black young man had been the perpetrator and that he had on a black tracksuit and that he had a husky voice. So the Boston community was outraged that this young, beautiful, successful couple, she had been a tax attorney, and he actually had a very well-paying job in, it's so off the time, but in a high-end, up-class sort of fashion shop that sold fur coats. So you can kind of imagine how ritzy that would be for...
Remember
those
Eric,
are the days.
Remember Eric Platensick. Remember Eric Platensick's Winter Sale.
Winter Sale.
That's got to be a Melbourne reference, is it?
They were a fur shop, wasn't it? The Datners?
Yeah.
Why am I saying Eric Platensick? Why am I thinking about the Datners?
That was him.
It was. Eric
Platensick,
though.
That was part
he
of the
was
Datner
a
group?
furniture person, I think, wasn't he?
Yeah, but that wasn't the...
240 Brunswick Street. 240 Brunswick Street.
It's right. Eric Platensick, What did they used to sell? Leather jackets. And they had fur coats as well. I'm not making that up. Yeah.
So Carol had died at 2:50 a.m. on October 24 at the hospital that she'd been in the night before for the prenatal session.
Awful.
Her baby boy was delivered by C-section. He was baptised in the intensive care unit and they named him Christopher William. Carol's funeral took place on October 28 at St. James's Church in her hometown of Medford, Massachusetts. And during the funeral, Brian Parsons, a friend of Charles, read a beautiful note that Charles had written in the hospital to his wife. "Good night, sweet wife, my love. God has called you to his side." It began. The note asked the public to forgive the murderer. And that letter can be read. I won't go into the details of it, but he basically says that he's had a beautiful life with her and you just have to trust God's
will, decision-making.
And he's called her home and, his life would never be the same without her, but who are we to question kind of thing.
The victims, and he got every right to question.
The baby, Christopher, was born 9 weeks premature and he'd obviously suffered trauma and oxygen deprivation due to the shooting, and he died just 17 days later.
I hoped he was going to survive.
No, with both deaths being ruled homicide. Throughout this period, Charles remains in hospital recovering from his gunshot wound.
I can't believe he's alive.
Yeah, and an investigation commences. So the Boston police detectives Robert Ahern and Robert Tinlin actually immediately suspected Stuart because to them he seemed too calm when recounting the shootings.
He wasn't even in the country at the time.
Charles?
Sorry?
Who's Stuart?
Charles Stewart.
Charles Stewart, that's what I thought.
I was going to say,
that's what I thought too.
Sorry, Charles Stewart. Chuck Stewart, yeah. They were overruled by their superiors who were who were pursuing Chuck Stewart's description of the assailant. And I'll remind you of what that was. Stewart had told police it was a young adult, African-American gunman with a raspy voice and wearing a striped tracksuit.
Black tracksuit, yeah.
Yeah. He'd forced his way into their car at a stoplight and ordered them to drive to nearby Mission Hill, which is, as I mentioned earlier, one of the black neighbourhoods. He robbed them, he shot Charles in the stomach and Carol in the head, and Stewart said he managed to drive away a little way and call the emergency number 911.
Do you think it's interesting that the police immediately suspect him when, back to your point about it being a very racist time, a very racist area, wouldn't you immediately think the police would just buy the story?
When there's a completely non-factual suspect.
What do you mean?
The only person who said they saw anything was him. And it's
but if there's this unconscious bias of racism that's going on through the whole area, wouldn't you immediately go, as a police person, probably is a black person? You'd probably be thinking it'd be very difficult for me to find out who it is.
To that. You're 100% correct. So you didn't quite let me get to it. So Robert Ahern and Robert Tinlin, the ones who suspected Stewart, Charles Stewart.
Oh, the superior said, shut up,
overruled.
Immediately. Okay, right.
And that's why because they were pursuing the white guys.
So they were not defective detectives. They were told to be defective.
Yeah.
At that point, the case was assigned to lead detective Peter O'Malley.
Peter O'Malley.
To be sure.
Of the great Irish. No, yeah, well, no, he's not. He's not a Protestant. He's a Catholic, isn't he? He's an O'Malley.
Yeah, he's an O'Malley.
Unless
he's Irish
from,
Catholic.
Northern Ireland.
No, I think he's an Irish Catholic. What then transpired is, as you would expect, given the background, an absolute manhunt. The Boston police and the Boston media totally took the husband, Charles Stuart's version of events at face value.
Did anyone report seeing an African-American hijack the car?
There's no reports of anything. Nobody saw anything.
No evidence of it. Yeah,
nothing. At this point, nothing.
Is there a gun? Have we found a weapon?
Not at this point. Nothing. Right. Nothing. So, the idea is sort of like, it's only a decade removed from the busing incident or crisis. Sorry, the busing crisis.
Tensions
Crack cocaine and crime. Tensions are high. And this is considered by the wider public as, racial violence. It's black on white crime is the way the media is presenting it, certainly the way the police are looking into it. And a weeks-long manhunt effectively terrorises large segments of Boston's black population. The Mission Hill community leaders estimate that at the height of the search, there were just thousands of stop and frisk searches conducted every single day.
In case one of them had the gun that, it just seems like there's no connection between a stop and frisk
it just
and
made
that
it,
incident.
It just gave them
they just go and do it it's a power thing.
Yeah. So they just indiscriminately used it. It was controversial, but they just didn't care. Stop and frisk tactics on young black men, which heightened racial tensions. And interestingly, the Suffolk County District Attorney, Newman Flanagan, called during this time for reinstating the death penalty, which had been abolished in Massachusetts in 1984, a proposal that received some support in the state legislature. I can't say that word. Legislature. Yeah.
Meanwhile, Chucky, who shot his wife and himself to cover it at home, is going, look at the trouble I've created.
Yeah, it was great. In late October, so remember the crime happened October 23, Boston police arrested Alan Swanson and his girlfriend on a breaking and entering charge unrelated to the murders. Swanson became a suspect in the Stuart case after officers found newspaper clippings about the murder in his home, and they found a black running suit soaking in his bathroom. And as I've seen with all of the commentary on this, the uniform of young black people in that day was an Adidas tracksuit. Yeah. Everybody had one. So the fact this guy had one soaking was not really anything unusual. They probably all would have had one.
I went to a 21st recently. I know, shocking, because I've hit that age where my friends' children are turning 21.
Yeah.
And it was a cocktail? It was something like it was dress up, right? So you had to look good. And one of her friends came in an Adidas dress. It looked like, and if you look closely at it, if you just looked at it in passing, she looked like she's wearing a tracksuit, but it was an Adidas dress and pants or something. I don't know even how it worked, but it had just black with the stripes, exactly the same. So they're back in vogue. So it could be the current uniform for what are they now? Alphas or whatever they are.
I never know what they are. I honestly cannot keep up.
Showing our age. Well, they're definitely not millennials. They're beyond. Oh, no, they might be millennials because this is 24. They're millennials or alphas. Anyway.
Whilst they've got Albie Swanson, ultimately they do conclude that he would have been too intoxicated to have committed the crime, so he is released. So meanwhile, it's just dominating both the local news and national news. And it's, I wouldn't be overstating it to say that it was just an absolute frenzy of racial, I wouldn't be overstating it because I can't think of
vilification. Racial vilification.
Yes.
It's just a media frenzy of racial vilification. Totally. Yeah, nah.
I've seen somewhere someone said that as a Bostonian child at the time at a local elementary school, he said that he'd probably heard more about Charles Stuart, in those days than about Larry Bird. Now, Larry Bird's like the famous basketballer. He said it was just the only thing anyone ever talked about. It was such a big, big story. Where we then go is there's another link to another young black man. And in mid-November, so remember the crime was the 23rd of October, the police arrest Willie Bennet in Burlington on a motor vehicle violation. The reason that they arrest him is because they have heard through, I guess, really the grapevine that he has been involved. And where this started was his nephew said to another friend who was over, I think his nephew was 15 or 16 at the time, they had some mates around. He lived with his grandma. They had some mates over. And there was a picture of his uncle who had done time in prison. And someone said to him, oh, do you think he's got anything to do with the Chuck Stewart and, Carol Stuart crime? And he said, yeah, he did it, or just as like a joke. But that child who he was speaking to then went and told someone else. And then, like a case of Chinese whispers, by the time it was told to the next person, it had been embellished. And it was that he had been there and he had shot them and someone had seen him. And it was a lie that then became fact. And then it ended up in the ears of a woman who was dating a policeman. And I presume, although I could be incorrect, I presume she was a black woman dating a white policeman within Mission Hill. I'm not 100% sure of that because I didn't actually spell it out. But there were a number of white policemen who were notorious within Mission Hill. And there were a couple that were called Fat and Skinny. And again, this was not implied. One of them was heavy, and he was awful, just awful. When
Which one,
they talk
Fat
about
or Skinny?
I didn't talk about Skinny. I don't know what the deal is, but Fat was actually
Fat was a prick. Fat prick.
Oh yeah, and he did that thing where he believes everything he did in the day was to the letter of the law.
Was perfectly fine.
Based on what they did. Yeah, like really.
Even though he was morally corrupt.
SOB, you know what I mean?
He's an SOB.
A mean SOB. Once this story had got back to the police station, they went looking for the child who was the one who had initially had the conversation with Willie Bennet's nephew. So it's not Willie Bennett's nephew, it's his friend.
Bigging up someone to make them sound tough and just,
So the nephew was the one who went, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did it. And the guy was like, oh, right. So he repeated it and then it got out of hand. But once they got that child in the police station or, young teenager, they applied such incredible pressure for him to say things that were not factual. They rehearsed him. So it's all recorded. But
David Avery'd him.
Yeah. But so they were able to then go and find Willie Bennet. They had charged him with robbery of a video store that they thought that he might have been responsible for. Again, they weren't certain, but that's how they were able to hold him while they were going to try and find evidence to support the fact that, yeah, he must have done it because someone said he did it, and that was all they needed. And he was a black guy, and he'd been, in prison before, so it must be him. So that was an absolute mess that resulted from these teenagers just talking shit, really.
Trash talk, yep.
Correct, yeah.
Michael Jackson called that in Billie Jean. Be careful what you say because a lie becomes the truth.
That's very true. The oracle that was the late Michael Jackson.
The prophecy.
So as of November 13, Willie Bennet is in custody, and the search, they think that they've found their guy. And
Willie Bennet's not the killer. He's just a boy whose nephew said he was the one. Sorry, Swanny.
So Charles Stuart is released from hospital finally on December 5. And when he is released from hospital, he is required to go and look at a lineup and identify Bennet. He was released from prison in early December.
Hospital,
not prison.
God. Clearly he should be in prison.
Oh,
because
God. Sorry, he was released from hospital. And guess where one of the first places he went to? One of the first places he went to was his hairdresser. Now, his hairdresser... He's been in hospital. He's been in hospital for a while. I understand that. His hairdresser he'd been seeing for the last 2 years, and his hairdresser was in a state of shock.
To get his hair done or for some other reason?
No, to get his hair done. And his hairdresser had said that when Charles Stuart would come in, he was very much about appearances, quite vain, always wanted to ensure that he looked the part. And he said, he was a pretty impressive guy, had a well-paying job. He was always well done. His hairdresser was male.
Okay.
And his hairdresser said that he'd seen him for 2 years, and in those 2 years he said, we never really talked about anything particularly personal. We'd have a chat. He said, but he didn't know that he was married, and nor did he know that his wife was, we didn't know that wife, pregnant.
But he would know all that now because of the media frenzy.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the first he saw of it, he said he walked in the night that it was first on the news and went to his wife.
Jesus.
Oh my God, that's my client.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was married. That's him, I'm sure. So sure enough, when he comes out of prison, the front desk takes a call. And
Hospital.
Hospital. When he comes out of hospital, he calls and the girl from the front desk goes to this guy and says, I've got Charles Stuart on the phone. He wants to know if he can come in for a haircut. And he's like, yeah, sure. And a colour. And he was like, okay.
He doesn't
normally have a colour, but yeah, sure.
Okay. He's gone grey. He's had a trauma.
So he comes in. He said, I'm in such a panic as to know what to say to someone who's just lost his wife and, child. He said, I don't know what to say. Oh, really? Let's just move on. So he says to him before he starts a haircut, he says, I really don't know what to say to you. If I lost my wife and child, I'd
be devastated.
I don't know what I would do. I'm so sorry. And Charles Stuart leans in and he doesn't ignore. He goes, I think I just need a bit of colour in here as he's looking at his salt and pepper bit on the side. I just need a bit of colour. So he totally ignored it. And the hairdresser said, I was mortified. I'd clearly overstepped the mark. I thought, my God, why did I say anything? I shouldn't have said anything. I'm the one who's put him in this terrible situation by even mentioning that. He said, so, I just got on with the job and we coloured his hair and cut his hair. And he said, look, I've got to look decent because I'm about to go in front of the cameras. Oh, yeah.
Weird.
He's like, I'm going to be in front of the camera, so I need to be camera ready. He was able to say that. He just couldn't make any reference to his wife and unborn child that had been slain.
Well, some might say that grief affects you differently, like different people differently, and it might be that I can't possibly talk about that, so I'm just going to ignore it and brush over it. But it hasn't been my experience. Well, he clearly was, but that hasn't been my experience of grief. So I'm just going to say, based on me, everyone should be the same. And every case we do, where someone responds weirdly and we say, oh, that's odd, but, people respond differently. And then it turns out, no, they were weird. Yeah.
Often.
In Boston.
Often in Boston. Is that the name of this episode?
I think it will be now. Often in Boston.
So with his freshly coiffed
hair. Oh, beautiful. Yes. Snaps.
Off he goes to the police to see the lineup they've got. And surprise, surprise, Willie Bennet is the one that he identifies within the lineup as the person who had attacked him. Now, Willie Bennet's image had been in every newspaper. It had been everywhere. They already presumed he's
guilty.
It was just
presumption of guilt.
Everywhere. Yeah. So unsurprisingly, that's who he. But it's
nailed for it. Yeah.
That again played beautifully into where the police needed it to be. Everything was going along swimmingly. By early winter,
but the Irish Catholic detectives.
This is quite interesting. By early winter, the identity of the person who had murdered Carol Stuart and her unborn child had become somewhat of an open secret. An analysis by the Boston Globe, later obviously, found that at least 33 people knew or suspected the truth by the end of 1989. So what I'm saying to you is the crime happened October 23. Within a matter of weeks, people were talking. And when I say people, I'm talking about people that are on the white side of the fence. They are starting to they're hearing suspicions and people are starting to talk to each other. So it wasn't as if nobody had any idea that perhaps the husband was involved. It was doing the rounds. Shortly after the new year, a group of Charles Stuart's siblings decided to meet with Charles's lawyer. Now, there's actually a recording where I think it's Charles's sister calls one of the other brothers. I may have this incorrect, but one of the people, the one that takes the call, is part of the fire department. And because it's part of the fire department, every call is recorded. So there's a recording of this, and it's a call saying, you need to come home. Sure, we're going to have a chat with mum and dad.
Got a little intervention.
Yeah, we need to have a chat with mum and dad. And the gentleman on the line says, well, I can't just leave here. And
A fire might break out.
The lady says, it's a crisis. Go and tell them it's a crisis. It is. You got to come home. He's like, all right. So she's not telling him the news. He knows. It's just we're going to go and say something to Mum and Dad. We're just going to tell
Mum and Dad that Charles is a murderer?
They're not going to tell him that. They're going to say, she says, we won't say everything. We'll say something.
We'll seed it.
Yeah, we'll just, we'll say something's about to happen. So the Stuart siblings decide to meet with Charles's lawyer, Jack Dawley, so that Matthew Stuart, who's the youngest Stuart brother, could tell him.
Sorry, Swanny. When is this happening? Is this within weeks of the shooting?
This is now the very beginning of January.
Okay, right.
So the shooting's at the end of October.
Yeah, and at the end of that year,
he's come out of the prison hospital. Sorry, the hospital. We'll get right. Yeah. He's come out in early December.
We've picked up that other
it's definitely Willie Bennet mid-December. And then everything's sort of like, everyone thinks it's all good, right?
Except his own family said, it's not Willie Bennet, it's you. Well, we'll just go have a chat with the lawyer. Yeah.
Let's see what they have to say. The youngest brother needed to tell the police that the carjacking story was a hoax. On the evening of January 3, 1990, Matthew Stuart told the Boston's police homicide unit what he knew. Matthew said that in mid-October, Charles had asked for his help with an insurance fraud scam. Now, this is quite strange because I've seen somewhere that they hadn't spoken to each other for about a year and a half. And I've seen their relationship described as Matthew Stuart was rather, a simple adult. Like he wasn't particularly
astute.
Nice word, good word, yes. Whereas Charles was considered the success of the family. He was the one who was making leaps and bounds in
difficulties,
terms of,
perhaps.
Career. Maybe not. I don't know. Okay. Maybe just a bit not quite so savvy. Whereas his, older brother was the one that everybody sort of looked up to. He was the one with an income. He was the one who'd married a tax attorney. He had stuff going on, right? He was the cool guy. So to actually hear from his brother and ask him for a favour or to help him out was unusual. They hadn't spoken for a while. But I think that there was sort of a claim, I think maybe Mum wasn't so well. So he, under that guise, he sort of said, look, someone's not so well. We probably need to patch things up a bit. Oh, and by the way, could you just help me?
Insurance fraud.
Yeah.
That'll really build a relationship up.
That'll bond us. There's nothing in this family like insurance fraud.
Insurance fraud, exactly right.
Well, it is an interesting thought, actually, because I was going to come on to this sort of later, which is what do we do for our families? At what point do we go, oh, God, I put my hand up? We'll get to that. Anyway, it's just a broader
thought. More importantly, what do we do for each other? Fuck the families. What do we do for one another? We hide the bodies. Yeah.
Hide the body, 100%. Yeah.
So it was quite simple. Charles had asked for his help with an insurance fraud scam.
I know.
Matthew would steal.
How many bodies are hidden on this farm? Sorry, Swanny.
I do, because my dog decided it was a great idea to bathe in the dead carcasses on your farm. Sheep, Swanny, it's all right.
We need to dig bigger holes.
Or any holes would be great. Anyway. Sorry, Swanny. Farming joke.
No, go for it. We good to move on? Right.
Yeah.
So Charles had asked for Matthew's help with an insurance fraud scam where Matthew would steal, in quotation marks, Carol's jewellery from the Stuart's house and Charles would file an insurance claim. When that plan went awry, Matthew said Charles...
Why would he need someone to steal the jewellery? Why wouldn't he just hide it himself?
I don't know.
Steal it in inverted commas, yeah.
I mean...
So then he needed another plan, a more effective plan.
I don't know if anyone's ever done an insurance claim because I certainly haven't. But do they come and search your house to see if the jewellery has been stolen?
Yeah, you just need a police report.
I don't know.
So I reckon you go to the police, say this has been stolen.
And they go, right, I'll file a report, you give it to the insurer, yeah.
Yeah, correct, yeah.
That didn't really go to plan or didn't work out. They didn't do it. I don't know. I really don't know any more details than that. But then Charles said that he had another plan. He said what he'd like them to do is he wanted there to be like a rendezvous, a meet-up in Mission Hill on October 23, where Charles would throw a bag through the window into Matthew's car. And that's how he would so it looked like there was going to be a robbery. Charles promised to pay Matthew $10,000 to get rid of the bag.
It's a gun.
So that's exactly what happened. Matthew drove up. He waited in a nearby sort of car park, came out, drove up alongside the car, and he said he could see there was something in the front of the car, but he didn't really know what it was. It was Carol.
Yeah.
He threw the bag in, and then Charles just drove off. So he didn't really know what was happening. He just had this bag.
Bag of a gun.
After Charles threw Matthew the bag, which turned out to be Carol's Gucci purse, Matthew said he hid the purse temporarily in the Stuart family home. You know, when he got back, he did that. He asked his best friend, John McMahon, to help him throw Carol's purse, but then something else that he found in that bag, her engagement ring and her wallet, and, you're right, a .38 revolver.
The gun for the gun. Oh yes, they both reach forward for the gun. Yeah.
But he wasn't going to do that initially. Initially, he'd taken it home. It wasn't until he saw on the news. So he had gone
looked at it.
Yeah. He'd gone and had a little look and had a bit of a chat to a friend and said, I've got this. And in that time where he'd gone to see a friend and come back, he arrived at the family home and they were just emotional mess because they'd had the call from the hospital to say, oh, my God, Carol and Charles have been shot. So and that was when he was like, oh, my God, I've got to get rid of it. So at that point, it was to go and totally get rid of it as opposed to just hide it at home. There was no discussion about getting totally rid of it. He did that because he realised.
Did he tell anyone else in the family, or just
not at that point?
Quietly went off and got rid of it? Okay.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So they quietly and threw it off a bridge and
how awkward. Awkward.
Matthew claimed, and he would continue to insist, and I think it's probably fair,
he's probably
that
right,
he did not know Charles intended to kill his pregnant wife. He also said he did not know Carol had been murdered until he saw it reported on the television, which, again, I tend to believe.
Why did he hide the bag after the scene and news story and not go...
Why did
he threw it off a bridge? He threw it off a bridge.
Yeah, but so that was after he saw that she'd been shot.
Because then he realised that his brother had done it.
Yeah.
So he's realised his brother's done it and he's thrown it off to... So
his brother,
he's got rid of the evidence for him,
Yeah.
And then he's had a change of heart.
Well, months later, though, like 2.5 months later.
6 weeks later.
Not long, yeah.
No, January.
Yeah.
So it's all played out, and maybe he's had a twinge of conscience that says poor Mr. Bennett's been pulled up for this and he couldn't. We know he didn't do it,
Now it's all gone too far. Up until then, I was fine.
This is where it gets interesting. So the same evening, Matthew Stuart met with police. Charles Stuart met with his lawyer. He dropped him off. He dropped him as a client and reportedly told him he needed a criminal lawyer. Fair enough.
Accurate.
After spending the night in a Braintree motel, Charles abandoned his car on the Tobin Bridge in Chelsea around 7 a.m. on January 4th, 1990, and then went ahead to jump the 135 feet to his death in the Mystic River.
Oh, I didn't see that coming.
No, neither did I.
He left a suicide note in the car that read in part, "Whatever this new accusation is, it has beaten me." His body was recovered from the river later that day.
Fuck off.
So he's not even fessing up to his guilt and committing suicide.
I won't take anyone else down with me. I did this. You wank stain. Right.
Wank stain, Jesus.
I mean, yeah, that's right.
Oof, that's a lot.
So
fuck off, Charles.
There were a couple of other people that were on the Stuart side that were aware of different things that were happening. So Matthew wasn't the only Stuart brother who Charles had tried to recruit in the fall of 1989. 2 months before the murder, Charles had asked his brother Michael and a high school friend, David McLean, to help him kill his wife.
What? This is a bit...
Yeah.
I don't understand. How do you even find people...
Where were they
that you're confident asking...
Yeah, well, you don't think that they'll come out and say,
excuse me, do you want to help me kill someone? No.
This is really
now that
important.
you asked me that.
This is really important, so listen up. So both claimed that they didn't fully understand what Charles was proposing until after the murder took place. David McLean's brother Michael McLean and his friend John Carlson approached Sergeant Dan Grabowski on October 28,
Oh, my God.
No.
1989 with information
So they came out
about
early.
Charles' role in
Fuck's sake.
Grabowski did not pursue the lead.
Fuck you,
And
Grabowski. Mike Grabowski, you're a shithead.
Grabowski.
They didn't really even interview his family. Like, I mean, it really was just bizarre in terms of, oh, well, this is what we're looking for. Black person, black person, black person, black person. Just do that. All the usual stuff didn't happen.
Unconscious or just conscious bias that says, must be a black person. He said it was a black person. That suits us. We'll go down that line.
Yeah.
Fuck's sake.
They also shared their suspicions with one of Carlson's relatives who was a police officer. That officer passed the tip along to Boston Police Detective Robert Ahern, who had earlier doubted Charles Stewart's story.
Not a bad guy.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
Ahern made only a desultory effort to follow up. I don't even know what desultory means.
Desultory, which means lazy. Didn't make like a half-assed effort.
Strange. Yeah.
Well, because his bosses had said don't touch it, and he's like, I'll sort of pretend to follow it up, but I won't really.
So, what were his motives? Do you think?
Oh, he's probably having an affair with someone else.
Great. No. In fact,
doesn't like her having a baby because her attention's not him on anymore.
It's kind of a little bit worse than that, but I've not even heard many men do this one. He had an issue with the fact that he thought she was getting a bit too big for her boots. No. Because she was the tax attorney and she was doing very nicely and she was the main breadwinner for the family. And she had this idea that she was going to go home and be, a mother and a housewife, which meant that they would lose that source of income.
Where's his money going to come from?
Correct.
He had to do
and
some
she
work.
had been a little bit when he was talking to the guys, or McLean about potentially murdering her. His reasoning was that she had become she'd become the more like the alpha in the relationship. She was more successful.
Right. Yeah.
She was more in control.
More
He said
assertive.
he did not like that. So, and the thought of her quitting the job as the tax attorney really meant that they would not be in the same financial situation, which he was not happy for at all. So fortunately for him, he was wise enough to make sure that there was an insurance policy, right? Which, of course, by the time this had all transpired, he'd already claimed. Yeah. So he'd got. He took
her money, but then he killed himself like within a month.
That was because he's got it. No, but that wasn't. He didn't kill himself because he didn't get the money. He killed himself because he'd got caught, right?
Yeah.
His brother had come out and said that. So the money was, neither here nor there. But I've got this in here. It says he was a man who not only killed his wife and unborn child, but actively sought to destroy the life of a complete stranger he knew was innocent.
Didn't matter. Yeah. Collateral
Chuck
damage.
Stewart had no reason to tell cops that William Bennet was the man who shot him, other than the most craven instinct of self-preservation. His hope that it would end an investigation that should have always centred on him in the first place. And it's true. And it was because of what was happening and how people felt about things. Everybody knows. And people were saying after the fact, oh, my goodness, you've always got to look at the closest contact, the person who's there, the partner, the husband, the wife, whatever it is.
6% or something.
Yes.
Usually, yeah.
And everybody just said, oh, okay. Oh, it must be a young black guy. Yeah, okay. And the police.
That's what I was saying earlier. Like the unconscious bias at the time was like, oh, it must be a black person. Yeah. Oh, it's disgusting. But he must have known that was the likely outcome. Like, I'll blame a person of colour and they'll go on with it.
They'll get it. Yeah, and they did. Yeah. And if his family his brother hadn't have come forward and said something,
which is quite remarkable in a lot of ways. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's remarkable that the family actually was like, let's go visit the lawyer.
In a New York Times article, Harvard psychologist Robert Coles describes Stewart as an extreme example of a psychopath, an antisocial personality with little sense of remorse, a propensity to lie, and often an ability to deceive others into believing his fantasies. In most psychopaths, said Cole, there is a cruelty and callousness, but Stewart outdid that. Wow, he just...
Nah, bullshit. That just sorry, I'm not to say that psychologist is wrong. However, it's better. It feels like a pass out. It's like, oh, he's a psychopath, and that's why I did that. I'm not quite convinced that that's because he killed himself, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but
finally got caught out. If he hadn't got caught out, he would have been fine.
But a true psychopath would still find a way to,
maybe
justify it and say, my brother's a bit special. He's not very astute. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Don't worry about it. He'd bluff it out. I feel like this guy was just a vainglorious prick who, as you say, it's different to being a psychopath, right? To just say this guy is so into, like I'm important or whatever, and now my wife's surpassing me, or I'm going to lose some of our income and the lifestyle I'm living. I'm not sure about that. I just think this guy was just a very selfish individual. Absolutely. You don't have to be a psychopath to be massively selfish, is what I'm saying. One
of the things I didn't really sort of elaborate on was the impact it had on Willie Bennet and Willie Bennet's family.
Poor
Obviously, his own. But there is footage of the night that they go to his grandmother's house looking for him. He's not there. They absolutely trashed the house. I mean, it's not an apartment. Yeah. And there were kids in the house, like and the teenagers and I think someone was like 6 years old or something, and they were treated like dirt. I mean, it was unbelievable. They broke the door down, the whole thing. They went through all of the stuff, and they did find a bullet in a wall, which didn't go down too well for them, obviously, but it wasn't related to,
just when Dad was angry.
And it was all done so publicly, and they've got like the camera crew on the front doorstep speaking to the grandma saying, how do you feel? And she was just, beyond her. Just like, how do you feel? What has your grandson done? What has your son? It was just so accusatory and like, you're nothing. So,
but that doesn't go away even after this guy's found.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that stays as a stain. It's a stain on the family. Yeah.
Anyway, so I've seen the family interviewed, and like they don't even want to say that they're from Boston. They certainly, they're from outside of Boston, but they don't like to say that they're the Bennets because they're just. It was such a big thing. They're like,
and
you
they
just
did
don't
nothing.
want to be talked about.
And they did nothing.
Well, they did nothing. Bennet was never charged with the murders of Carol Stuart and her unborn son, Christopher.
Because he didn't kill them.
Correct. But in October 1990, a jury found Bennet guilty of an armed robbery at Brookline Video Store on 3 accounts of assault with a dangerous weapon. That said, they said that there was this feeling in Boston that even though he didn't do it, because people had wanted to believe it and that's what would suit their own bias, they had to put him away, right? So there were real substantial holes in that case, and there were different descriptions from different staff members at the video store saying, it wasn't him. So, but they had to lock him up. It was like they just had to do it because then that vindicated what the police thought. He was a crook anyway. He's a bad guy.
But also, it makes the police look less bad.
Do you know how long he got sent, or what he got sentenced for?
He was sentenced for 12 to 25 years in prison, and he was released in 2002. He's still alive.
Holding up a video shop.
Yeah.
12 to 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
This is the point I was trying. Like they're going to get him for that and put him away for the murder.
Yeah.
25 years, as we know, is a minimum for murder, right? So we'll put you down for murder, even though you didn't kill anyone.
So he must have served what? He served 12.
A video store, which is probably a 2-year sentence or something.
Yeah. So he served 12.
The video store's longevity didn't even outlive his sentence.
Yeah, that's right.
DVD came in.
He's still alive, and he still lives in.
God bless him.
I think he might even still live in Mission Hill, but he doesn't see anybody. Like, he's quite a recluse. He doesn't trust anybody. He just is so affected by what happened to him. And he said, "You don't understand what it was like at the time." He said, "People were spitting on me when they the police and those people." And he said, "I was told I was a woman killer, a baby killer. I was the lowest of the low, and it wasn't true, and nobody cared.
And it was innocent, yeah.
People just treated me like with utter disdain, and they were beating, and they were just awful. They had to keep him separate because he would have been murdered straight away if he'd been put in anywhere where there were other people, other crims. But he does have children." And they are really switched on young people. And there's an interview between the daughter and her father, just an audio recording. And she's gorgeous and he's okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's very sad and whatever else, but he's still around. And he's just so destroyed by what happened. And he just said, I was no angel, but I I was not a monster. I didn't kill my wife. I didn't kill an unborn baby. I didn't put another man away. That wasn't me.
I didn't do what the actual perpetrator did.
Yeah. Then I've seen the teenagers interviewed who were there. Two of them. One is his nephew, and
sorry, Uncle,
who was the one who had the conversation, and the guy who was the one who took the story elsewhere. He said, I really wish I could apologise to Willie. He said, I was a kid. I was just talking shit. I just shared something that I heard. I didn't really know or care, and it just got so out of control. And he said it was a lie. And when they took me to the police station, he said they were telling me I was going to go to prison, and I was going to go to prison for the rest of my life. And he said, no, I was a kid. And it's just this thing of everywhere along the line. So the story, the way it's presented, and the documentary that I watched is called Murder in Boston, Roots, Rampage, Reckoning. And it is a 3-part series, and it is brilliant. And they do not focus on the Stuarts at all, really. You see very little about them. It's all about the victims being everybody but the people who got killed. It's like how it just exploded and everybody else was implicated, or it affected so many lives in such a void. Oh, totally awful. There was something that I wanted. There was one thing that I thought was really nice. I sort of wanted to. Oh no, 2 things I did in popular culture. One of my favourite things I had to go to is Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, who you may or not know. Boston.
Yes.
Boston, massive. You know, they're always talking about one. So I didn't know this, but in 1991, the song Wild Side, which is a cover of, Take a Walk on the Wild Side by Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, it refers to the case. And each what's that bit where they, the bit between the chorus and each verse is about like a hardship in American society, and about 3 verses in, there's one dedicated to the Stuarts and Willie Bennet and whatever else, and it tells you about that. So that was a huge deal. And then the thing that I wanted to sort of end on was Carol, who is now, who was the wife, is now referred to as Carol Dimati. I think it's Italian surname, Dimati. Yeah. Dimati. In her memory, her family established the Carol Dimati. It's got an extra I. I'm not sure. Dimati. Yeah, that'd be right. Dimati, I think. The Dimati Stuart Foundation to provide scholarships to Mission Hill residents and Malden High School graduates, so black children. The foundation helped students who showed leadership ability and had significant financial need, and provided recipients with mentors and summer internships. One of the beneficiaries was the daughter of Willie Bennet, the man falsely accused of Carol's murder. Isn't that lovely? By early 2006, the foundation had awarded $1.2 million to 220 students. The Dimati's attorney and family spokesman Marvin Geller told the press, Carol would not want to be remembered as the victim of a sensational murder, but rather as a woman who left behind a legacy of healing and compassion. And I think that is beautiful. I really do. Because what a horrendous turn of events to be about to have your first child
and to be taken
oh my God, absolutely. What?
Like unbelievable. Let's go to a prenatal class. Oh, and they're going to shoot you in the head. Oh my God.
But there were lots of things that when in this documentary they interview lots of journalists, and they're saying like there were so many things that were wrong all the way through that were not investigated. The fact that she'd been shot through the head, the fact that she still had her seatbelt on, she was shocked. She didn't know what was coming, right? Whereas he's a massive unit. He'd be the one you'd approach first and get rid of him. She was like 5'2".
Shot her in the left temple. Did he shoot her in the left temple?
No, I don't. It was actually the back of her head. He must have got out of the car and come from the back or something. I don't know.
Look over there. Bang. Anyway.
That, my friends, is the murder. Murder in Boston is the name of the Stocko series. It's on Binge, and honestly, I found it riveting. I really did. It was just the way it was presented in affecting all of these people's lives the way it did.
It's awful. Yeah.
Really awful. Because in many ways, some things are the same and some things are a bit different, but, scary.
Well, thank you, Swanny. That was good. What about sentencing? I'm going to take our mate Chucky.
Yeah.
Because I've given this some thought. And he was a vainglorious prick. So I think he needs to have all of his follicles of his hair plucked from his head because he wouldn't like to go bald. He didn't like his discoloration of his roots. So let's pluck all those to start with. And maybe we'll do a little bit of needling on his cheeks so that he's got rosacea. And
sorry for me, I've got rosacea. It's not that bad.
No, but we'll make it very bad for him, right?
I've got psoriasis. Maybe get psoriasis.
Yeah.
Right, we'll give him psoriasis. Let's just give him everything that people are worried about so that he becomes – this goes back to a early sentence that I did many years ago. I've done it 3 times. This was the 3rd time. Princess Bride, if you recall, the sentence that's about being really, really ugly. So we'll pull out all his hair and we'll give him rosacea and we'll cut off his nose and we'll cut off various parts of him so that every child that looks at him says, what's that hideous beast? What's that horrendous thing? But we'll leave his ears perfect so he can hear every child saying, what is that thing coming towards me? Because he's so vain, so repulsive in his, what really possesses a person to kill someone else because they're not going to earn all the money for me or they're not going to do this or they're going to be, Jesus Christ. So my punishment is all about honing in on all of those motivations that he had to kill his poor wife and his unborn child and just doubling down on all the repulsiveness that is in his soul that needs to come out and everyone can see that. There you go. That's my punishment.
Fair enough. Boys?
I'm just a bit grossed out by the whole thing. It's you have that phrase, it's so base, and it just feels like asshole husband, tick, successful wife, tick, stereotypical black perp, tick.
Yeah.
Just all like, come on. And the fact that it all gets lapped up, I'm okay with him dying at the bottom of the Boston River or whatever the river was that he went into. I just wish that happened 3 months prior. If he could have just taken his own life at the humiliation of having a successful wife who is pregnant, that would have solved a whole lot of grief. I'm not comfortable at all with what happened to Willie in any stretch. And, the fact that he got found guilty of the video store, we don't know the detail about that, I guess, enough to know whether or not he actually did it. But, God, 25 years or 12 to 25 years or whatever, are you kidding? That'd want to have been a bloody violent burglary and perhaps stolen a whole lot of money.
If he clocked someone over the head, left them unconscious and nearly dying, and we don't know the details of that crime.
Shot a couple of people, maybe.
Yeah. No. If you shot a couple of people, you should get more than 12 to 25 years.
Well, I don't know.
But anyway, the point is,
podcast would suggest otherwise over the last,
we'd like to be comfortable that the punishment fit the crime. And I'm not sure we are.
I feel like people sentenced him for the crime he didn't commit when they found him guilty of that crime.
Well, that's what Swanny intimated.
It's, those people that behave like that, rather than going, my God, look at what he's already been through, let's just let it go, or let's give him something lenient. They go, no, let's double down. Even though we now know he didn't do it, he bloody well may as well have. And so we'll make his sentence as bad as we possibly can. They need I don't even know how to sentence those people, but fuck. Maybe a little bit of what happened to Willie's grandmother for those people.
Yeah,
so,
that's a good one.
Having the media front them and tell them about how horrible their families are and, people spitting on them and dirty souls.
I think that's sort of where I end up as well. So I think there's 2 things for me, which is, one is this idea that Charles Stuart believed that Bostonians would always believe that a black guy would have been the criminal over him. Like, that wouldn't have even entered. He was so confident that it wasn't even a particularly well thought out plan or anything. It was just that it went so well because everyone was like, oh yeah, definitely the black guy. All he had to say was it was, a black guy that did it. And it took its own life and it did the work for him. Do you know what I mean?
The rest all happened.
He didn't have to do anything. They even took the people that suspected him at the beginning off the case. And then there was no thorough investigation around. No one spoke to his family that I can understand. No one sort of tried to work out whether he'd been having an affair. That at least, no one was really talking to anyone.
So gross.
Which is very strange given the media attention. It was so focused on the black community and really stirring up this idea that we were right, they're wrong. They've they're a risk to us, we're a danger. They normally kill each other, but now they're killing us. It was just vile. And I think what happens is when that's going the way people like it to go, everyone's, woohoo, let's get them pitchforks. And then, he did it. What are you laughing at, Schmitty? What did I say wrong?
Let's get them pitchforks. That's what it was.
Pitchforks.
Pitchforks. Yeah, I know what you mean, but it was just a funny image.
I just think then it's like the mirrors flipped on them. It's like, it's your guy who did it. And instead of going, oh my God,
very uncomfortable.
Do you think
on us?
Do you think the police apologised or local? No, they all just sort of went, okay, well, that's terrible. Let's pivot a little bit, and then we'll continue to focus on the fact that this guy's now done another crime. It was
still a crime. Yeah,
disgusting.
That was one of the things, and which is not really a sentence, but just an observation. But having seen the documentary, and I didn't really go into this too much, but there's one particular detective who is, I think he's fat, but I can't be certain because they show a bit.
Skinny then, is he?
Because what they do is they show the young black, they're not young anymore, but what was one of them, the young black teenagers. He's saying, there were like loads of white cops and they were terrible and they did this. And then he goes, there was one couple called Fat and Skinny. Anyway, then they show a photo of two policemen and a policeman. Then they cut to
Laurel and Hardy,
the retired guy. And throughout they go back and, I was bigger then. Anyway, his name is Bill Dunn, retired detective Bill Dunn. He's so confident that they did what they had to do. He'd say things like, I've got the key to get in here. It's my boot. Just the most piggish things. And I don't think for a moment that he has taken any of it on board. Like, it's not, he doesn't see it the way someone who observes it sees it. He's like, no, we had a job to do. And in fact, I feel sorry for the current police force because they can't do what we could do. We didn't break any laws. We just did what we were told to do.
What?
Oh my God, he is terrifying. He is terrifying. So if I could put a sentence on anyone, it would be him. And I would like to switch roles so that he had to be a young black individual. And I want him to be a good guy, but it wouldn't matter in the wrong place or the right place at any time. And that he's the one who's pulled aside, spat on, told you did it, told this is how you're going to say it. So that was just a total role reversal because he will have never had to experience that as a white policeman, especially. Correct. In Boston. Yeah. He thought he was fucking top of the heap. Oh my God. It was just.
It's a good sentence.
You've got to watch this documentary. It is really, it's
I would
great.
put that fat piggy on a spit, but sure, that's good.
Oh, he's just.
That's another option.
He's very scary because nothing has changed for him at all. Where there are lots of people that they've spoken to from the black community, there are people that say as a result of this,
now that I think about
this crime, that they have the jobs that they have because people had to become more aware of different things. They're advocates or activists or lawyers or whatever else. Yes. Yeah. So they've got positions in society that would never have existed before. Beautifully spoken, eloquent people who just said.
And then there's Fat Piggy Wig.
Yes, we actually had rather a nice existence as young black people within a community. We had our community. It was the way other people perceived us. And when they started to move us around, do different things, say this is what you've got to do.
That's such a mess with what we had.
Yes, they were not, it's never right. It's never the right thing. Anyway, that was a bit long-winded. Apologies. There you go.
Very good.
Just found it riveting.
Nice one.
It was
that was
very
a good story.
Yeah, I found it really interesting.
All right. Well, Swanny, great story. Never heard of that. Absolutely new. I always thought Boston was all about Paul Revere and the English are coming, and the Tea Party and shit.
Well, interestingly, it's a lot about sport, and you will know that. Things like the Patriots, like the NFL, like that's very Bostonian. The Celtics, Boston Celtics. Is it the Red Sox? Yeah, so they're hugely sporty. And I found this article, which was Boston has a race and sports problem. And there's a quote in here. It is because
it's sports.
Think about it.
Racing is a sport.
Because here we go.
The NBA's
all-time leading scorer LeBron James described Celtic fans as racist as fuck on his series. He recalled being cussed at and having beer bottles thrown at him, and he's not the only one. Like they just are dreadful. They are so terrible as fans. This is where I think I'd heard of it before because it's so common. Everyone's always sort of making light of it. Oh, they're so racist. They're so racist. I've seen a comedian talk about growing up in Boston. He said, I grew up in Boston, in the racist part of Boston, and everyone pisses themselves off. Oh, you don't really get it? I was like, okay, I don't really understand why. So now I'm like on it.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Jeepers.
Yeah.
All right, well, excellent story. And as we say every week, miss you already.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye now.
Ta-ta.
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.